Why do you think you're not writing?
I don't know. I get a good idea, and then, bam, I start thinking that is the stupidest thing ever.
Tell me about it.
Ruby Sparks, 26 years old, raised in Dayton, Ohio.
Why Dayton?
Sounds romantic. Ruby got kicked out of high school for sleeping with her art teacher, or maybe her Spanish teacher. I haven't decided yet.
I'm glad you found something that inspires you.
Inspires me. Like I'm falling in love with her.
That's wonderful.
I can't fall in love with a girl I write.
Why not?
Because she's not real.
I missed you in bed last night. Did you get some good writing done?
Look at Leon over there dropping the knowledge, man.
Hey, man, I know my Zoe Kazan.
You know your Kazans, man.
I do.
People, the girl who wrote the script for this movie, her name is Zoe Kazan, and it turns out that she's the granddaughter of famous director Ilya Kazan and playwright Ilya Kazan.
Yeah, famous and infamous director.
And infamous, yeah.
Oh, because I was about to ask, who the fuck are they?
You don't want to show your ignorance on this one.
Please, let me show it.
Oh, you about to get it now, brother.
Come on.
I feel so vindicated all of a sudden.
Spew out some more of that.
Ilya Kazan, man.
Knowledge.
He sold out all of maybe I'm exaggerating, but he sold out a lot of people in Hollywood.
I mean, the thing was, he was a super talented director everybody loved, but he's infamous now for selling out people
during the McCarthy era.
Yeah, as being communists.
Yeah, half the people in
Him
Hollywood
and,
who...
Guess who? Ronald Reagan, one of the other main guys who was selling out people left and right.
I'm not going to make a big political thing
and
out
to
of
put it
this.
in context to you, when they were giving him a lifetime achievement, Robert De Niro was the one standing out there with him like, "Hey, you fucks, clap for this guy."
And meanwhile, Nick Nolte was in the audience. They put the camera on him, and he was saying, "Fuck this guy." Yeah, it was a weird moment.
It was.
Yeah, the guy he's got a lot of history. He fucked Marilyn Monroe, and
who didn't?
Yeah, who didn't at the time? Yeah, but I mean, whatever you think about the guy's past, I mean, he did make some great movies. That movie I was telling you about the other day, the Andy Griffith movie, Facing the Crowd.
Facing the Crowd.
Yeah, that's a Kazan movie on the waterfront. Baby Doll, your favorite movie?
Baby Doll. Yeah,
I love on the waterfront.
Other than contributing his sperm, he did nothing to make this film.
But that's what I was going to say. Now, the point of bringing all that up is all you college kids out there with that script, just get a famous grandfather and you can get your script made.
It shows you that, with a lot of talent and a lot of nepotism, you too can get your movie
seriously,
made and distributed.
It's funny how much easier it is to get films made when you're related to someone really famous in Hollywood.
Now, one thing I will say, to not take anything away from Zoe Kazan, is that she is extremely talented as a writer. She writes a lot of plays, and and screenplays and everything. I mean, she has productions that go on. Like, this girl's only 27 years old. She's done a lot. She's 28.
But she's 28 now.
She hit the ground running in her career too.
Yeah.
Like, one of those things that almost a little more than a teenager was starring in Broadway stuff. And it was like, damn, she's a really good actress. She's a really good writer, and this is like definitely her like coming out to a wide release film and saying, hey, check this shit out.
So,
what does America think?
So she's one of those chicks that likes to do a lot of things, huh?
Yeah. Either.
Oh, okay. She moves too fast. I can't handle that. Yeah.
I don't want to take anything away from her either, because again, say what you will about Ilya Kazan, he's got some talented sperm.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like the perfect match for this girl to team her up with these directors, Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Faris, who did Little Miss Sunshine, which of course was one of those few indie films that sort of cracked the code of wide release in America.
Indie might be a little bit of a stretch.
Well,
right there. I know that's where they try to pass it off.
It was an indie film that they went, wow, this has a big appeal and we think this can stretch to a bigger crowd. And sure enough, it did. And this is even more indie in some ways, because I feel like it's picking from a smaller, less successful.
Yeah, whereas Little Miss Sunshine, it's questionable whether it's indie, but this definitely is.
Yeah, I mean, it's still one of those movies though that has enough star power in it to push it out there, especially if it's good. I think it's I had never really heard of this girl before. Apparently you guys had. And when I saw her in this movie, I thought, well, she's a pretty talented actress. And then I saw her in the credits at the end and saw she wrote it. And I thought, man, this girl I think she's pretty amazing. I know there's been a lot of people who have criticized this movie because it sounds like they compare it to some things that they've seen it before. Woody Allen movies.
Well, I thought of it as it's like Woody Allen writing weird science. That was what I thought.
That's a good way to put it.
That's what they're doing. A lot of people are saying, man, this movie, she was trying to be Woody Allen. It could have been more Woody Allen-esque. And I hate when people do that shit. Or, man, this could have been taken in a darker, more twisted place. And to myself, I was very satisfied walking out.
You know, whenever
But
somebody says that, I go like, you know what? You go write that movie.
But you want to know what, though? If you really think about it, because, I mean, when I saw the trailer for this, I was like, oh, man, here they go ripping off Weird Science again. Everybody ripping off Weird Science. But then I thought about it, and I was like, well, Weird Science was, they were ripping off Frankenstein. And I'm like, and for me, like, watching this movie felt more in line with Frankenstein. Not to say that that's a bad thing at all. That's just a story that constantly gets retold, and there's absolutely nothing fucking wrong with that.
Well, no, I wasn't
great.
criticizing that.
I'm not even talking about you. I'm just talking about... No, keep yourself out of this.
You don't even enter into this shit.
Why are you here?
Oh, yeah, you still here?
But just the idea alone is such a great idea, and the way they presented it here, I thought was pretty goddamn impressive.
Yeah, it's that Weird Science, but taken on a lower, smaller scale, but just so much more realistic. Because you gotta love the fact that, like, man, if you create your perfect woman, but you're still kind of a douche, she's gonna leave you anyway.
Well, it's a fantasy film that's not about, like, if you're wondering the whole time, well, come on, when are they going to explain to this how this happened? You're watching the wrong movie.
Yeah,
well,
that's really not the point.
Because we might be getting a little ahead of ourselves again. It's Paul Dano plays a boy literary genius. He's wrote the great American novel at 19, and he's been coasting off that novel for years because he can't really write anymore. He can't find any more ideas, mainly because he's just kind of a whiny bitch too. I mean, he thinks he needs therapy, but he's just fucking whiny. And one day he gets inspiration to write a character, Ruby Sparks. And when Ruby Sparks, played by Zoe, what's her name? Kazan here. And after all that talk, I forget.
Zoe Saldana, Chanel.
One of them Zoe bitches. But no,
we need to make a flashcard.
Why don't you do that for me?
I will next time around.
Some white bitch, I don't know.
Why don't you be the guy at the bottom of the stage where I'm like, line.
Here you go.
Kazan.
It's coming.
But no, he writes his character, Ruby Sparks, and he's talking to his brother one day and saying, I've started to write again. And he says, and guess what? This creation that I've made has come to life. She just appeared out of nowhere. His brother's like, okay, now you really are crazy. But lo and behold, this girl has manifested herself in some kind of way. The movie doesn't really explain it. There's no flash. There's no lightning. There's not.
She's alive.
Yeah, no, there's not. Yes! My words.
It just is.
Yeah, it just happened.
And even though he is going, what the fuck? Like I said, the point is not to figure out why. The point is to ultimately get into this character, say, okay, this is how things are. It's like being John Malkovich in the same way that Kaufman wrote that, where it's like, don't worry too much about how there's a door into John Malkovich's head. Let's just, once we've accepted it, let's just move on with what would happen after that.
And this is more of a reflection on what is that perfect person. I mean, it's not. This is not about. This is not one of those movies where Hollywood had made it. She would have came out and she's doing all this wacky stuff, and scientists are trying to get her to figure out how to.
It would have been I Dream of Jeannie, the movie.
Exactly. No. This is more about how this guy thinks he has the perfect girl, and then it's an examination on relationships, and also a point where you have to reflect on what are you doing to ruin your relationships. What is it about you're looking for this perfect person, but what if you're not perfect, which nobody is?
Putting your expectations on that other person unrealistically.
Yeah.
It's also in some ways a deconstruction of a very recent phenomenon in Hollywood as far as excessively using it, which is in the feminine archetype, that manic pixie dream girl.
Yeah.
Which we see with every actress named Zoe, pretty much.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
But here
it's like I wrote this with Zoe Deschanel, and I remembered, wait, my name is Zoe. I can do this my goddamn self.
But here it's like you're seeing that and you're watching this, and the first half of this movie is like a male fantasy. You're like, because you're like, man, this girl's cute. Yeah, I wish I could do that shit. She's hot. She is the manic pixie dream girl. You're like, yeah, that's awesome. I want my own.
She's just kooky enough to make it fun.
And when things start to turn, and he's like, wait, she's acting like a real person now and responding to the fact that I'm kind of a douche. I felt guilty watching it. I was like, oh man, I probably would have been a douche too.
And that's one of the cool things about it, like when you realize who this guy is, which we've all known somebody like this, or we ourselves are probably this character.
We might be sitting in
we are that guy.
Yeah, where you start, if you really think about who you are and what you actually have to offer somebody else, not so much what they can give to you, but what you actually have to offer them. I love that dynamic that they play in the movie, where you realize he really doesn't have anything to offer, and she starts to get really fucking bored, just being around him, just, trying to have some semblance of a life, which, and that's the cool thing about the story is that you realize she's manifested as far as she has her own fucking brain. She's not like a walking zombie.
She's not a real doll.
Yeah, exactly. She's not a real doll. She has her own motivation. She has things she wants to do. She's looking at the world just like anybody else. And the unfortunate thing is there's consequences to that, especially when you have a master that will not let you fucking go anywhere.
Well, that's the whole thing is like this guy and many people fantasize about this type of girl. They have that illusion that that's what they want. I really want a girl who's totally her own person and she's independent and willful. And it's kind of an attack on the male, that dream because like, you don't really want that.
It's not even so much as an attack. As like you said, it's more of a deconstruction. It's holding a mirror up to it.
Yeah, no, it is.
Because it ain't going like a feminist thing, going like and she's going like, no. I tell you what, I'm not gonna say nothing. I just want you to look at this from the opposite view and see. And you go like, oh shit.
To understand why you think you want this and make you look at yourself and go, are you sure that's really what you want?
It's funny because in that it kept making me think of High Fidelity, where you had this character who thought that like, well, clearly it was all these women that were the problem in these relationships, and it's like, dude, when you gonna catch on to the fact that it's you?
Yeah, no, you're right.
You're the common denominator.
It's a deconstruction of the male fantasy.
Yeah,
I mean, and I don't even know if the movie that's what is. I don't know if it was written because it takes just a natural path. I mean, you think you want something perfect. Perfect is boring. Then you start to write another angle of perfect. Then it gets crazy, and then it gets annoying, and then but you have no choice but to have somebody have their own independence. And when you have something, and when somebody has their own independence, you're gonna have it's work.
Yeah.
And that's what this movie does. Like, because it really does come down to the motto of no matter how perfect that chick is, somebody's getting tired of fucking her.
Is she getting tired of fucking you?
Better yet, she's getting tired of fucking
Which
you.
is the main point. It's more her getting tired of fucking because the guy's just doing his thing. He's like, oh man, this is great, because he's so used to his world, which isn't all that interesting. He's not as much as he does, as much as this guy does in life, as much as he can be kind of a social, just a social elite almost, because he has all this prestige and he's known as a great writer. You think, wow. All these parties this guy can go to with his new girlfriend, you think, oh, what could go wrong? But when you realize that the guy doesn't care anything about that, he's more kind of like a homebody, and you start to see that like really turn into something ugly, especially when you have somebody else in the relationship that you're not really putting any work into. And the reason, I love that part.
I was going to say the reason why that works, that ugliness that you're talking about, that reflection on what these characters are. I mean, because again, when we say what's perfection in this movie. It examines that on every level. Everybody thinks this guy is perfect because he's a genius, but we get to see just how many problems psychologically this guy has. We see Ruby Tuesday and her character, but all this is helped because
Ruby Sparks.
I mean, God, man, I'm kind of hungry. I'm sorry.
I know.
She's going out with TGI Friday.
And he does love the Rolling Stones.
Yeah. I wrote about a restaurant. It actually just built itself.
Can't wait for those jalapeno poppers.
No,
That's going to be the sequel.
I know it's going to do that too. But
you must use the power of your flair.
This place that has the best appetizers. No, it's a very human movie. I mean, it's a fantasy that doesn't take that angle. And that's where a lot of these. That's where it actually feels independent. Now, I don't think that if this movie didn't have the caliber of actors that it had in there and the money behind it, and believe me, the money is nothing. It's nothing big here either. I mean, I would say that this is probably in the single digits as far as millions goes. If it isn't, it's about $10, $12 million.
Majority of everything that takes place is in an apartment. I mean,
but it has that feel of somebody who didn't have a lot of money to make a movie that probably would have had some special effects, and then they just had to be more creative and that comes down to the writing. And I think this girl is a very talented writer. The way these characters evolve and the way you see them discover their own problems and the reveal about just how messed up they both really are. That's what really drew me into the film. Mm-hmm. And there's so many side characters in here where they just could have wrote these characters off as throwaways. Like Antonio Banderas.
Oh, he's so great.
He plays Paul Dano's stepfather in this movie, and Annette Bening is his mother, and they play this hippie couple. His mother has just rediscovered herself.
I painted when I was young.
Did you?
Yeah. Calvin never told me.
Well, their father didn't approve.
Because she painted porn.
Nudes.
In positions. It was basically porn.
I think they are very sexy, Harry.
Mort's been encouraging me to take it up again.
You should do it, Mama. You're very good at it.
Lovey.
You're good at everything that you do.
Lovey.
Everything. It's so good, Mama.
Oh, sweet.
So good.
I mean, those two are just having the best time playing this movie. Antonio Banderas is one of those guys. He's the guy that was trying to be cool when he was young, and he was. But the older he gets, when he's that old guy that just said, "Fuck it, man, I ain't got to be smooth no more. I'm just having fun."
Well, you know, that's the important thing here is that not only does the film have like a story that's actually pretty deep despite its fantasy, you know, what it's wearing on its sleeves, but it never forgets to have fun at the same time. Like you've got side characters like that. You have Elliot Gould as the psychologist who is terrific in this. Steve Coogan who plays like an agent in this who's really funny. I mean, there's lots of little sidebars.
Like Steve Coogan is like, hey, we need a slimy character. Steve Coogan is our man.
If they ever make an Adam and Eve movie, I want him to play the snake. I really
the brother, who I think was Chris Messina, is so funny when he finds out what the deal is. When he's like, "Wait, like you're full shit, you're crazy. There's no way you created this girl out of your mind," and realizes it's real. He was fucking killing me.
His reactions were so priceless.
He's got the shit-eating grin for the next.
I wasn't liking his character at first because I'm not used to seeing him play those kind of roles, and I was just like, I don't know if he was the right choice for this. But you're right. There comes that point when I was like, okay, no, he's perfect.
Wow, Leah, you know what? They gave him from the very beginning. They gave him a couple of lines, and those were sitcom jokes that he was saying. It felt very staged, and I thought this guy's not very impressive. But the moment that you saw him and Paul Dano starting to be just more laid back and more like brothers, and especially when Ruby Sparks appeared, that guy just let go. I loved him.
Well, that guy was kind of like the avatar for the audience because you know that's where it really sells you on the premise to where you know he's not even really like he's trying to get an explanation, but he's not really getting it. But the evidence is right in front of him, so he has no point but to just accept it.
Well, the audience is kind of him and Paul Dano too, because you know, like we're like going, she's already perfect, right? Like the brother's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to change? Right? You're going to write something else, right? To change something and make her even better. He's like, I would never do this. This woman is perfect, and you know, the audience were like, yeah, that's right. You're a good guy, and so am I, because I'd be the same way. But there is a point that comes that you and him are both like, oh, I got to write some shit on here, and that's where it becomes fun and sort of gets like a Twilight Zone characteristic of like the more you change things, the worse it's gonna get.
Well, that's like the breaking point of the movie. Like up until that point, it's almost like a fun little happy romantic comedy. I was like, all right, this will just be a jaunty little light thing, whatever. And that's when it starts to turn to where toward the end it gets like downright dark. And you're like, fuck, what movie did I walk into?
You made a good point was just bringing up the Twilight Zone aspect of it because it is when it gets dark, but I appreciated that it was very honest. It was, that whole ugly side of what could happen with something like this actually happening. I mean, they really did a good job, especially with that scene, and especially with the actress just really getting that through because that's a very scary moment when you think, wow, you know, I know this guy's kind of an asshole, but it's when the Dr. Frankenstein is turning into a complete monster, and you see his creation trying to turn against him. That I mean, it just really worked. But saying that though, I have to admit, as much as I really appreciate everything this movie gave, as far as the performances, the writing of it, I couldn't help but feel that it was still very predictable. And when it came to the very conclusion of the movie, I have to admit I was pretty let down by it because it just didn't make too much sense as far as everything that came before it, you know?
Well, the final beat, like the very final beat, it was funny. I was like, well, like I said, they kind of had to end it that way with what they built up to. But then I went out and I thought about it. I was like, and I can't say it here. I wish I could. But I was like, hey, what's going to happen when... And you'll say it to yourself, too, when you watch this movie. You'll go, wait a minute.
Because I can think of something else that might happen. I'll talk to you.
But ultimately, it's just like the fact that they don't spend too much time worrying about how this happened at all. Don't worry about the fantasy aspects of it in that sense and the whys and wherefores. That's not the point, you know, because everything else works great.
You know what, man? I totally agree with you about their conclusion for this movie. And I'm with you. because I almost want to stop this right now and said they could have gone so many ways with this, but they went for what felt like almost a cop-out ending. It was. This is the movie that has its independence to do what it wants to do. It did it through the whole film, and then all of a sudden it seemed to come to some sort of crowd-pleasing conclusion. And I thought to myself, you didn't have to do that.
Yeah. It undercut the story.
It really did. Now I didn't even hate it. I was just disappointed by it. But I love this movie though. I really do. This is the kind of film that is very quiet, that says so much, and it's also that kind of movie that makes me think. I hear people keep saying they want to make another Twilight Zone movie, and they don't need to make a Twilight Zone movie, because now we can make movies like this that get to explore those themes that they could only do in a very short amount of time and almost make them goofy in a Twilight Zone type setting. Here we can examine something very deep, and again, not having to do it with too much. Like I said, I love the movie. The only complaint I have is that last part. I mean, for as well written as this movie is, I'm almost baffled that this girl thought that would be a great way to end this movie. But I give it a full price.
I didn't have a problem with the movie. I mean, with the ending. It was a way to go. I mean, there could have been a more cynical ending to it, but I didn't mind that it left me.
See, that's why we need to talk, because I didn't even think of a cynical ending. I'm not even thinking about that.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll talk afterwards.
Okay.
But honestly, by the time it got to the end, it made me go like, you know what? This would be a great companion to 500 Days of Summer. It just gave me that same kind of feeling. Like you could watch, if you came out of that and like, man, I want something else like that. I would go like, you know what? Watch Ruby Sparks. We've said all the great things about it. It's one of those things where, you know, it starts out with something that's too good to be true, and you know there's something bad's going to come, but it doesn't come from the place you expect. And that's what's powerful about it. And even though it's not the kind of movie where you go like, you got to see this on the big screen. I mean, it's a movie that, you know, it would be just as powerful watching it at home. The writing, the quality of everything, and just the surprise of it is enough for me to give it a low full price.
You know, it's funny, like the ending, as much as I did think it was just too pat, the reason for that wasn't tonally. Tonally, it fit completely with the film. It was just that in terms of like, where the fuck did this come from? It didn't make any sense. Like how, even though the rest of the movie never questioned itself that much on its fantasy, I did go, but why, how did that even happen? Why
Really?
would that
'Cause
happen?
I thought that was clear.
It didn't make sense to me why that would happen that way at all. Or who this, well, anyway, it doesn't matter. It didn't make sense to me, but then I went, you know what fucking difference does it make? Because the film didn't even really, there came a point where people stopped asking how this was possible at all. And like I said, that just isn't the point of this type of film, and it does everything else so well, and it's so charming. You know, it's funny, when Paul Dano first started, and the first thing I remember seeing him in is There Will Be Blood, I guess.
You didn't see him in Little Miss Sunshine?
I think There Will Be Blood was first.
Wasn't he?
Little Miss Sunshine was first.
Yeah, it was first.
Okay, well, I didn't care for him all that much at the beginning of his career. He
I
kept
didn't
being
either.
in good movies, but I was always like, who the fuck is this weak chin guy? Why is he in big movies?
And he always looks wet too.
Yeah. He's a drowned rat.
But also, like,
I would never want to shake his hand.
His face looks a lot like a young Liam Neeson, because the way the nose just sticks out to the front of the face. He's got a Roman nose.
He just has something about it. He just kind of like, I'd see that guy go like, I bet you could buy heroin from that guy.
You know what it's like? It's like when you take a cat that's really furry and you stick him in some water and you bring him out. You see how skinny they are.
looks like Paul Dano.
Liam Neeson is this guy. If you put him in some water, he gets
Okay,
wet.
if Paul Dano would go in and get the Captain America Super Soldier Serum and come out as Liam Neeson.
Yeah, okay, I like that.
Yeah, I keep thinking about those Geico Stone Age guys.
But his performance is the fact that he is a really good actor, and he is in fact getting better as his career goes on, I think. It goes a long way. Zoe Kazan is really, really great here. She's charming as hell. I really think we've seen the launch much more so out of this movie for her as like, wow, what's going to happen next for her? There's going to be a lot of agents going, we're looking to cast her in fill in the blank big Hollywood project. As well they should. This is a really solid movie. It's not for everyone, but even so, it's got more than enough. It moves fast enough. It's got enough charm. It's got enough fantasy that even kids aren't really going to be disappointed with this, and adults are going to get the deeper stuff that lies just underneath the surface. So I give this a full price.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
It's interesting hearing you say all that, Cyrus, as far as like Hollywood looking, because I keep thinking this is going to be one of those movies that's kind of it's going to go under the radar. I feel there's not going to be enough interest in it until people actually see it and they start, getting the word of mouth. As far as that girl is, I think she's going to make a great career as far as screenwriting. because as far as like being an actual leading lady, probably not, because she's very, I mean, I think the part that sold it to me was this girl felt very real and felt very much like the creation of this guy, because to me, she almost looked like his sister or something, to where I was like, I can see probably this is what this guy would totally look like. It wasn't a Megan Fox. This girl wasn't that at all. I mean, I hope she does well. But saying that, she's a great writer, and that's one thing I admired about this movie was really the writing. And of course, when you have great writing, you're going to get great performances regardless. I mean, they could fucking cast Pee Wee Herman as the fucking troubled kid writer, and you'd still get the same great performances.
Well, I don't know. But no.
Well, come on. but you know, it is one of those movies, though, that, I mean, I have to admit, I did find it a bit predictable towards the end. And when we did get that crowbarred ending, I really did feel like it undercut the movie. But saying that, I'm still going to give it a full price, because it's very rare to see a movie like this where it really, like, you know, it really shines as far as just the story that is getting across, and especially not being afraid to go to that darker side of what, you know, a story like this will eventually manifest itself into.
I'm laughing
full price.
At you making the comparison with Megan Fox, because I mean, not because of your reasoning of that, but just try to picture her in this role. Then it really would have been a remake of Weird Science.
Oh, yeah, no, it would have.
It's almost like he forgot to give her a thumb. You know, she's got that weird thumb on her.
Two thumbs.
You know, and I'll tell you, man, I do agree that Paul Dano, there was something about him, I don't know what it was that annoyed me about him early in his career.
Yeah.
And here, I think he's coming into his own. I really like him.
You know what? Besides him being like, because I thought it was just me who was just kind of like, I don't see what the big deal is about this guy, but I just knew people who kept making a big deal about him when he was in the movie. They're like, oh, Paul Dano's in it. And I'd be like, yeah, so? But this is the first time I've seen him in something where I was impressed.
I was really liking him. I wish you and I could have been the brothers co-hosts of Paul Dano's movie, because you and I would have been on each side of him. And you've been talking about, hey, man, give him some titties. And I would be like, hey, get more ass, man. Come on, let me type it in there. Come on.
I'll type it for you.
Yeah.
Ass, titties.
Ass, titties.
It's like when we come and go, why are you guys wearing bras on your head?
You manifested a woman with your mind.
You can make her do anything you want. For men everywhere, tell me you're not going to let that go to waste.
This is the true and impossible story of my very great love, Ruby Sparks. You may see this and think it's magic.
Hi, Ruby. Hi.
But falling in love is an act of magic.
You don't know jack about women.
I know Ruby. I wrote her.
Just don't tell me how it ends, okay?
I won't. I promise.